Hey everybody, Sam Prime here with Gamers Command. I'm getting ready to fly out to the Reraise over in Pennsylvania. I fly out on Friday and I come back on Sunday evening late. Fly out real early. It's going to be a really quick turnaround trip for me, but I do feel pretty prepared. And the last time I felt this prepared was probably Omaha. And Omaha felt like, obviously, looking at the results, Omaha came out in first. My buddy Zayn came out in second. We finished first and second in Swiss and first and second in Top Cut. So that went pretty well. We don't know that this is going to go as well, but I feel pretty good about my understanding of the format. A lot of that comes from the way that I've prepared. If you look at my results in tournaments in general, I think that people probably think I'm better than I am, where I make a lot of in-game mistakes, a lot of silly decisions, a lot of not fully playing through my turns like I should. That's an area that I have to work on, and an area that I think would make me a lot better player. But because of the prep that I do, I tend to, my deck choice at least tends to be pretty good. I kind of want to talk about that prep and what that looks like for me, what maybe that should look like for you. So first off, the re-raise this weekend is a 2-deck format, 70-minute time limit, best of 3. So if your average match is 30 minutes, which I believe it is, and you have 70 minutes to complete possibly 3 of them, you could get into some pickle with time. So we're going to talk about deck choices, and what I really think that the default is that you should play like an aggro deck and then like a control deck. I think that's the default, and here's why that's the default. If you play 2 control decks, your chance of going to time and losing, because in time the breaker will be damaged when you're playing a control deck, is significantly higher than if you were to play 2 aggro decks. Where at the same time, the default is not to play 2 aggro decks, because maybe a lot of times people don't enjoy aggro decks as much. Not a lot of thinking behind aggro deck, and so it doesn't lean itself to people's playstyle a lot of time. That's not to say you shouldn't play 2 aggro decks, just that it's not what I would consider the default. In the France re-raise that happened this weekend, Evan Tanguy played 2 aggro deck and crushed it. So it can work out really well. Evan's known to do pretty well, so I can't really argue with his choices. So that being said, take that into consideration. Which deck to play first is another thing to consider. So if you are playing an aggro deck and a control deck, which one do you play first? I was talking to Travis about this, and he was thinking that he wants to play his aggro deck first, because it just saves him his brain power. Then he knows how much time he has left to win the game with his control deck, and he can kind of base his choices off that. And I think that if I play an aggro deck and a control deck, that there's a good chance that I do the reverse, where I want to play the control deck first, because a lot of the decisions are a lot more in depth and a lot more impactful, I feel. And so I want to play the control deck with as much time as I possibly could want, much time as I could possibly need, and play it. And then also, sometimes when you're playing the control deck, that you have no outs and that you can scoop. So you just have a little bit better understanding of what the game's looking like. And so if the game's going to be longer, and you can see that you don't have an out, but you're possibly going to need to go to game 3, you can make those decisions. And furthermore, when I'm playing the second deck, the aggro deck, I want to be able to just play without thinking nearly as much, which lends itself better to be the second deck, because it's probably a little bit more natural, requires less thinking. You've already used up some of your brain power. So that's kind of where I would go as far as my deck choices and which to play, whether you conserve your brain power first, or you preserve time first. That's where I would go. There are some other things to think about, like if you're going to double search with like Dominion Legionnaire into another Dominion Legionnaire, or you search Sarah into Kolka, Northstall into Distilled Skin, etc., etc. Whenever you're going to be doing multiple searches, if you're not going to like when you plan out your turn, right? You open your opening hand and you see Northstalin, Chocobo Sam. If before you play the Northstalin or the Chocobo Sam, you need to know what you're searching for with that card. And then you need to know what you're going to search if you're going to play that other searcher, whether if you play Northstalin, if you're going to also play Chocobo Sam, or vice versa. And so when you're doing this, I think it's really important that you think about the turn, what you're going to get, what you're going to do. Don't play Northstalin, pick up your deck, and be like, okay, what do I need to search for? Figure out those decisions, and then execute after that. So you could be like Northstalin. Well, I'm gonna play Northstalin. I'm gonna search for my Stiltskin, or more often than not, I'm gonna search for my Althea. Put it to my hand. Leave my deck face up. With probably a card that they've already seen, like a Northstalin, so they don't know your exact deck choices. And then, I'm gonna also play Chocobo Sam. Any responses, and they're probably not gonna Amaterasu you, so there's no reason to not just do this back to back. And if they do Amaterasu you, then great. Then you're probably winning that game anyway. So you do that, and then you search for your Choco target. Same thing if you play your Sarah. I think there's nothing wrong with leaving your deck face up. Grab your Kolka and be like, I'm also going to play Kolka in response. Because once they allow you to search for your Sarah, they can't respond until you can already play your Kolka. So then they can respond. Then you're like, okay, I have a response. Okay, great. I'll shuffle. Here you go. Response. All right, Kolka resolves. Or doesn't resolve, I guess, in that case. Or you just Kolka, and you can even get your search target for Kolka ready if you're pretty sure that can respond, especially on like turn 1 or 2. They're almost never responding. And almost never should respond ever. Like, it's just such a high cost to respond to that. So you save a lot of time. And it might not seem like that big a deal, but saving time everywhere you can is really important. Another way to save time in the 2-deck format is to make sure that you are shuffling your deck between rounds. Now, if you show up to your opponent and you just hand them your deck, they're obviously going to want you to shuffle it, and that's fine. You should shuffle your deck in front of your opponent so they can see that you're optimized or you're randomly shuffling your deck. But if you feel like you need to pile shuffle, your deck should have been shuffled in between rounds, while they're making pairings. Just constantly talking to your friends, shuffling your deck. I don't know how many times I have conversations about the last round while I'm still shuffling the deck, because I like my deck to be thoroughly shuffled, and I want to make sure that it is. So shuffle between rounds. Don't show up to your 70-minute best of 3 match and start pile shuffling in front of your opponent a couple times, because you're just wasting time. And I'm not going to get started on how much of a waste of time pile shuffling is. But if you feel like you have to do it, please, for the love of God, do it between matches. Part of a good use of time in between your matches too is scouting. Really important. And with scouting, I want to talk about a couple things. People will probably be scouting your decks too. You should be playing both your decks in the same deck box. So if, for example, you could play, like I have here, like I have Samurais and Mono Wind. If I play these in a tournament, I won't use the ones that say Samurais and Mono Wind. I'm not trying to be deceptive in that way, because people can actually pick up on that. So what I would do is, let's say I have just two of the white deck boxes that are blank. I would do that. Or you have something like this, which is actually probably what I'll be using. And so I have in here both my decks that I'll be playing in the Reraise. Again, maybe. I don't know for sure that I'm playing these ones yet, but they're in here. Crystals, don't show up to the thing. Pull out your crystals, set them on the table so your opponent knows that you're playing a crystal deck. There's no reason to do that. Just do something like this, just a little divider. So right here I have my deck, and then up here with the little divider, I have my crystal. Okay? And so I can just pull out, so I show up to my opponent, they see this, they see me pull out my deck. They have no idea that there's crystals in here. When I need a crystal, I can reach in there real quickly. I have a crystal. So that's what I do. Sleeving. You notice with these decks, they're all the same sleeve. You notice my Samurais, my Mono Wind deck, same sleeve. There, same sleeves. Random pile of cards that I'm considering on the table or whatever, all sleeved in the same sleeve. So that when you're scouting people, they can't be like, okay, um, his X Death sleeves, when he plays X Death sleeves, that's his mono fire deck. And if you see him with his Furion sleeves, then that is, I don't know why I just randomly have these sleeves. Then that's when he's going to be playing his mono wind deck. And just think about that. You don't want to give your opponent any type of information on what you're playing before you play it. So don't. Keep your sleeves the same, keep your deck box the same. But do take notes of that. If you see someone playing Furion an X Death deck, which one's the X Death deck? Is that an X Death? Because I feel like if my opponent has a mono lightning deck and he's sleeved up in 2 different sleeves, the one that's X Death has the X Death in it. And maybe you want to try and be tricky with your opponent. I think you just lose out on just not letting your opponent know anything by sleeving everything in your X Death sleeves or whatever. So that's what I would do. Talk about playtesting a lot. So I've been playtesting a lot with Travis, a little bit with Zaim, not as much as I'd like. Some random matches here and there with some friends. I want to talk about the process. And so early, I like to play with takebacks, for example. Play with like double-sided cards. So a card could be Ready on one side and Push on the other side, and you flip the card based off what you thought was needed most of the time, and you can kind of see like, hey, this card would be better most of the time. Most of the time, you're seeing the card flip to Push side, then Push is probably better for your deck. Most of the time, it's flipped to Radius side. Radius better for your deck, and so you play this way that it allows you to test out cards multiple ways. You do take back so that you're playing optimally. You're seeing, can this deck compete, and at what level can this deck compete? And that's really good. Now, during the middle game, so like, let's say like a week or 2 before the event, maybe 2 to 3 weeks before the event, you start timing your matches. So Travis and I were playing 70-minute best of 3 matches, trying to see if these decks can compete and complete their matches at 70 minutes, best of 3. Travis being a newer player and not familiar with every card in the game really let me do that really well, because he's a realistic opponent. Your opponent isn't necessarily going to know every single card in the game. They haven't been around, like most people haven't been around since Opus 1, myself since Opus 3, I'm pretty familiar with every single card in the game. That doesn't mean, you shouldn't stop and read them, blah, 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 but you're going to take less time to do so. And so you can play these timed matches to see if you're going to be able to reasonably complete your matches in time. That's important. If you feel like you're playing the Mind Flayer deck and you're spending a solid 25 minutes every single time, then you might have an issue. You might have a problem if you can't beat your opponent within 25 minutes of the deck, because you don't have that time all the time. Just something to consider. And in later cases of playtesting, I think you go back to individual choices. You try to optimize to try to get the fine-tuning of your deck perfect. That's what you'd like to do. You like to do fine-tuning of the deck absolutely perfect. And so you try to make the small changes. Talking about fine-tuning, I need to know how my decks were doing against Fire Ice. I need to know how my decks were doing against Samurais, Mono Wind, Monks. I have Mono Wind, Monks, Samurais. I have all these decks built out in front of me, and they're not. Here's the thing: they're not. This is not generic Samurai. This is a deck that I have put hours into to know that this. I firmly believe that this is the best version of Samurais out there. It's the best version of Samurais. I firmly believe that. If one of my friends says, I want to play Samurais, do you have a list? This is the Samurais list that I'm going to send them. And it is good. It's straight out of the box. I believe, and this is going to sound, a little wild, I believe that this is the best version of Wind. It's better than anyone's version out there. Not drastically different. I'm not saying that, like, oh, this is a brand new archetype that Wind has not seen. No. This is maybe like a few cards, maybe like 4 cards off of the most popular versions of Wind, and I think that this is the best version of Wind. I spent hours tuning this deck. because I want to play against the best versions of the deck. I can comfortably say on stream, very comfortably say that Mono Wind is a deck. I was at like 6 decks a couple weeks. I am down to 3 decks, and Mono Wind's one of them. And I don't really care if you know that, because there's really nothing you can do. Mono Wind's a known deck. It's not like I'm holding some top secret. Again, this list probably 5 cards different from Metagame. I can comfortably say that the deck has proven so strong that I am very heavily considering it. But that's only because I put in the time to test against what I thought would be the best Mono Wind deck, and then it kept crushing. My own Mono Wind deck kept crushing me, and so you need to tune not just your decks, but the decks you're testing it. If you're playtesting with your buddy over and over and over again, and you're crushing them, it's real good. It's really easy to make yourself feel good about that. If their decks aren't fine-tuned, you need to help them fine-tune their deck so you're playing against the best possible version of the deck. When I play with Travis, I'm constantly saying, oh, well, in Reraise, I would play this, or in Reraise, I would play this, or when he was playing Mono Fire a lot, Control, I would say, you need to fix this, or he was playing a lot of Fire Ice, and I'd say, hey, look, I think that, this package is just much better in the deck because of X or Y, because I want to play against the best version of the deck, and so I think that's really, really important. That you fine-tune every single deck that you're trying to play against. Again, that's just if you want to do well in an event, you've got to put in the work and have that championship attitude. And you can still, Final Fantasy is still luck-based sometimes, right? You can still lose. Put in all this work and still lose. That's going to happen. So that's not to say you're going to do all this and then you deserve the win. It's just to say that if you want to win, you need to put in some work. Not as easy as just showing up with the right deck. Put in the work for tuning. Talk a little bit quickly about metagame. We look over, I've had this open for a while now. Let's look at the last few re-raises that have happened. We got Mono Wind taking it. No surprise there. We have the Reraise deck. The Reraise deck finished 4th in Swiss. Finished first because the L6. And that's something to note, because the top cut was L6 format. So let's look at what finished first in Swiss. And again, it's not just what finished first, it's just something to look at. So Reraise finished first in Swiss. That's good to know, something to think about. And again, understanding their format before being like, oh, I need to play this Reraise deck because it finished first and it's obviously the best deck. Well, this deck didn't do the best in the event. It just it made top cut, and then their ice water Glaciella crystal deck carried them in, which is pretty cool. We haven't seen that list. So then look at Malaysia, Mono Wind, but this is L6, right? So is all of this L6? Let's see. We look through. Looks L6 to me, right? So we'll look at one more list. Looks like L6 to me. That does not mean that there's nothing to take from there. These cards are the newer cards. They're because of power creep, probably more powerful. So this is an L6 tournament. Also look over at this number 14. So with 14 players, I would take this tournament less seriously. With L6 being the format, I would take Mono Wind's win with probably no seriousness. These ones have 30. I look at like 30 plus events usually. Reraise France. So you look over here. These are the top 8 decks. Again, I have a Tenant guy with Avalanche. And we'll come back to this. And Mono Lightning. Kingsglaive. The loose terminology for the deck, I think, because it's just super aggro deck. So there's these decks. This event had 85 people. That's a lot of people. Best of 3 format. Sounds good. If you deck A first, if you win, you must change decks. Sounds a lot like ours event. So I really think this is a good model to look at when you're trying to build a deck for our event. They played the same format, which is really cool. All right. Let's see. There's tops for that one. I'll look at some of these. I know some of the Jacksonville locals, and I know that they're pretty good players. So I trust that their standings a little bit, right? We have Irving here. We have Jim. I don't. Jim might not have made this event, but I trust the Jacksonville guys, mostly because I know them, so I trust how that event went. Even though it was locals. Your Melbourne Reraise with Christopher Matisky, we had Win being first and second. Two of the better players in the event for sure. Both piloting mono Win, kind of storming through, pun intended, these decks. Yeah, so you look at their event. However, their event was single deck. So it's interesting to look at because okay, I should probably talk about that. And probably under when you're choosing your deck, what to think. All right, if your deck loses to the same archetype, then no matter what, then you're in trouble. Here's what I mean by that. If you play Chris's list, and Chris can vouch for his list if he thinks differently, more than I can, but I tend to think that hyper aggressive starts against the Win deck, because it runs a low number of EX and a low number of board clears outside of playing a bunch of stuff and then Luso, the deck gets ran over. Now, why does that matter? Because if you play two of those decks and you play against a person who's playing mono Win, you will win the match. Because no matter what deck you start with, no matter what deck they start, it doesn't matter what deck they start with. They can start with their non-Win deck and crush you. So they could be like, I'm going to play an aggro deck and a control deck. I'm going to play Wind as my control deck, and I'm going to play Avalanche as my aggro deck. And then they open up and they crush your deck with Avalanche. Now they're off Avalanche. They have to play Wind for the remaining two games. If both of your decks have great matchups against Wind, you've won the match. That's something to think about when constructing your deck. If your deck is a 60% dog to aggro, you can construct your deck and play your deck knowing that and kind of try to hedge some outs and be okay with it. If your deck is an 80% dog to aggro, you need to think like, this is a 70-minute event for two decks. Can I show up with mono Win and lose back to back because I played aggro deck? And I don't know the answer to that. I'm just saying that is the one thing that is making me hesitant about playing mono Win, is that if someone shows up with super aggro Roche, Alba, mono Lightning, and Avalanche, and they're trying to kill me on turn 3 or 4, one deck can probably crush that. Maybe like let's say I'm playing my old Ice Earth control deck, or I'm playing a mono Fire control deck, or I'm even playing Sorays. There's a lot of decks I'm thinking about that I played with. All of those decks can definitely keep up and compete with that type of storm from an aggro deck, but Wind cannot in most cases. Again, you could construct the deck in a weird way where like you had Dragoon backup with Vanira and Fina to like board clear. There's all kinds of stuff you can do to kind of hedge into that. But at the end of the day, if you're playing you're playing against two super aggressive decks, you could be in for a world of hurt. Just something to keep in mind. I'm not saying don't play Wind, because I'd be a hypocrite if I should have played Wind and then you guys were like, oh, you told us in your video not to play Wind. I'm not saying don't play Wind. I'm saying that understand there are people who are like, I don't want to spend 70 minutes thinking over every single turn. I'm going to play two aggro decks, crush people, have plenty of time for scouting, plenty of time for drinking, water breaks, eating food, relaxing, saving brain power. Those people are going to probably do better than people who are super stressed out. And so you might play against two people playing aggro deck, and just something to keep in mind. Again, not saying don't play it, just keep that in mind when constructing. All right, what else do we have? Let's see. We went over the metagame for those tournaments. There are some things to kind of to look out for too, right? I mean, so if you go, well, here's also the Epic Gaming re-raise. Oh, that's the old format. Never mind. All right, so let's look at like the France. Let's look at the France. The France list. All right, so if you look over at the Avalanche, you expect to see the new Elfay, right? No Elfay, right? Instead, straight to the point, We want 1 Earth backup at the very least. And then we're gonna play our Barret, and then we're gonna like dogpile our Avalanche Operatives in and attack. I think I would play Elfe, but I haven't. This is one of the decks that I have not put a lot of time into, so I don't have an Avalanche deck built. I'm not surprised I'm not playing Avalanche unless something wildly changes. Yeah, but I'm not. I'm currently not playing Avalanche with the Reraise. Not in my top 4 decks at all. But I'm sure that Evan put in the work and said, hey, look, I know that the fire backup's really good, but fire backups are so bad that I don't want to play it. So just keep that in mind. You know, like the lists are very streamlined. I'm just going to kill you. That's what it's trying to do. And apparently it did that very well. You look at his mono lightning deck, look at how aggressive this list is. Alua's deck. Noctis the mono lightning. Rosh. This is insane. This Arnea. Like this list is just mid preview with all these 1-drops. The deck is just trying to run you over so quickly. It has 3 Crow to like put your blockers out of the way. All the backups kill stuff anyway. That puts stuff out of the way. Doesn't matter if you draw a card or if they take point damage, they're killing you. Right? Doesn't matter if Evan wins the game on 6 damage or 1 damage, he still wins the game by killing you to 7. That's just something to think about. You know, the individual card choices matter. Cards, you know, like for me, the best card for me in this set so far is bar none. I'll grab both because there's 2 cards that are just very, very good right now to me. These are my 2 favorite cards from this set. X-Death, Man in Black. I got 3 full arts of both of these because I think that they're just by far and large the best card in the set. Currently, so right after this, I have plans on working on X-Death and Black deck. But currently, I'm not playing those cards because I couldn't find the right deck, and I don't have the time because when I hit the can this compete part of the optimized playtesting part, and even when we got down, the deck, because you should have no Sacred Cow. Right? You should have no Sacred Cow. But those 2 cards to me were sacred. I loved them so much, despite not usually liking lightning cards. I loved them so much that I forced them through the early part of the testing when they still weren't competing. Even though I was like, well, you know, listen, if I fine-tune it, I think these cards are so strong they might compete. But they made it into the later start where I was just getting crushed with those cards with against Mono Win. Yeah, Mono Win was still just crushing them because they're both really cool cards with very powerful effects, and Mono Win just doesn't give a shit. Like, it doesn't give a shit. That's the bottom line. Like, it doesn't care what you're doing. It's doing something way more unfair than what you're doing. And so that's just something to think about. There are some really good meta cards you need to be aware of. You need to be aware of how good Man in Black is because someone might have busted it, right? You need to have an answer for it. You know, when I'm building my when I'm building my Samurai's deck, right? I'm constructing it. Even though I don't plan on playing Samurai's, I've still built the deck in a way that can handle Man in Black and X-Death. I've thought about those things. X-Death is pretty great against this deck. It's really good against the Samurai's deck. Removing their break zone and having it, and so removing their break zone is obviously amazing. Removing their cards at the end of turn is good. They play so many characters that you're almost always going to hit 20 very quickly, right? On top of that, your X-Death being a 10k is extremely relevant against an entire deck full of 9k. Sounds good, right? It is. So what have I done in my Samurai deck is I've made sure, like, for example, like, Amaterasu is at 3. I know that seems normal, but something that maybe not normal is that my Terra is at 3, right? I need to make sure that I can have access to Amaterasu most parts of the match, ready for their X-Death. You know, so Man in Black is a little bit easier for this deck to kill, but point is like I'm fine-tuning the decks with these cards in mind. I need to know that my Radia decks are punished hard by the fact that Prish exists. And while I might not think that Monks is the greatest deck, it doesn't mean that there won't be people playing a lot of Monks. And Prish is punishing those decks. It's punishing Palem Porum decks. So, you know, just you need outs to these types of cards. You need to be considering that when you're deck building. All that's really important. Yeah, I think that just about covers it. I know I talked fast. I talked for 30 minutes. That's just my thought process and how I'm approaching this re-raise. Hopefully Travis and I do well. You know, who knows? Anything can happen, but we're definitely gonna go have fun representing. Get to see people. It's funny how I'm starting to see these Miami guys more at these big events than I do normally, and they're only 3 hours south of me. I definitely need to start making some more trips to see them shortly. But yeah, thanks for tuning in again. Thanks for helping make us affiliate on Twitch. We are moving our streaming to Sunday nights, and that won't be this Sunday, as will be the re-raise. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you guys later. Bye.